believe I was really 13, 14. A friend of mine had told me there's gonna be some CGI show on YTV. And I sat back and the TV just lit up and ReBoot started. And my mind was just blown away.
So I would just religiously watch it every single day on YTV.
I was always just like rushing home to watch it as soon as it comes on.
ReBoot is about a colorful cast of characters, quite literally.
What it's like life would be like, you know, personified inside of a kind of a digital realm.
Everything that's going on inside of your computer made into like a city full of societies and communities.
From the era where computers weren't such a common thing,
ReBoot just looked like nothing else. It sounded like nothing else. And I don't know, like frankly, like the storytelling wasn't really like anything else.
You just get really attached to the characters. Like they go through so much trauma together.
It was able to handle a bunch of really big topics, be it loss, responsibility.
The story of ReBoot isn't just the plot, it is their victories of like, you know, what they were slowly able to do, not just for, you know, CG animation here, but, you know, all around the world. It was a lot of people just kind of like feeling things out and slowly pushing the boundaries of what they could do.
And ReBoot is something that absolutely started a whole series of different CGI shows from different studios. They made the formula.
Definitely would like to know more about them. All I know is usually like 4 guys.
What brought them to Vancouver? Why Vancouver? Why us?
The team that they brought together were really smart, brilliant people. Crazy, but we all were.
Like everything happened at the right time for ReBoot.
The people, the place, the idea, the technology, all at the same time making something great.
Lightning in a bottle.
It is lightning in a bottle.
My name's Gavin Blair, and I'm one of the guys who created ReBoot. I come from a very working class town in Yorkshire. Growing up where I grew up, you probably became a miner, or maybe a steel worker. My dad and my brothers worked in the steel industry. But I was the arty kid, and I wasn't interested in becoming a miner. If you grow up in a family like that, a working class family, and you show aspirations or signs of heading in a different direction, I think your mother is very much like, oh, thank God he's not going down the pit. But they were also very proud of what I was managing to achieve.
My love of animation grew out of my parents taking me to Saturday matinees at the local cinema. Every week they'd show a Disney movie. And I got to watch, you know, Jungle Book and Fantasia and Pinocchio, and all the classics were doing a constant kind of a circuit. I fell in love with the idea that something that didn't actually exist could have a life. And Dad was a good drawer. He was great at drawing the Disney characters as well. So as a little kid, I'd sit with Dad and suddenly Mickey Mouse is there, or Donald Duck, or somebody like that. And I'm just like, oh, this is amazing.
When I was a kid, I didn't know quite what I wanted to do. I always enjoyed movies, and I always enjoyed TV and things like that, but I never entered my head that I could get a job doing that. I first saw Star Wars in 1978. When that Star Destroyer came overhead, that was the moment when I went, okay, I don't know if I can do it, but that's what I want to do. And then Blade Runner came out, and I was a huge Blade Runner fan. And I was like, okay, no, I want to do that too. When things like Duelists, Alien, Blade Runner came out, you had the articles in magazines saying, this is Ridley Scott, this is how he got what he was. He's got a great eye because he studied graphic design, yada, yada, yada. He won awards for commercials. And I was like, okay, cool. Because I'm like, whatever, a teenager at this point. I'm like, that seems like a plan. I went to college studying graphic design with a specialization in animation and TV design. You make your plans when you're a teenager and you go to college and you study what you're doing and things you like, things you don't like, things you've got a knack for. And your plan sort of meanders and changes a little bit.
I was actually training to be a fine artist, and I wanted to be a painter, and I had all these arty-farty ideas, but then I realized I wasn't actually good enough to make a big mark on the world with that. So I changed that to graphic design. I love graphic design, so I ended up at Leicester Poly with Gavin.
I remember he was this tall guy with crazy hair, big head of just mad professor hair.
Gav seemed to be much more into Northern English values because his family's from Yorkshire, right? So I'm a Brummie, and there's a definite difference between the two, but not enough to stop us being friends, being really good friends and doing projects together at Poly.
I think the first time I actually spoke to Phil, we had a drawing exercise, a design/drawing exercise, where you had to pair up and sit across from each other, and you had to draw the other person. And then you had to take what you'd drawn and refine it into as few strokes as possible that still carried the essence of the drawing that you'd done. So like a caricature, or more than a caricature, more of a graphic statement. And that was the way. And we just clicked and got on okay and worked together on stuff. Me getting into animation was not in the plan. I was interested in animation. I always liked animation growing up. You know, I knew I had the ability there to have a play with animation, and I did. And I liked it.
I remember two of my friends went into computing in my hometown in Sunderland, and it was when you had punch cards. This is how really old. And I remember sitting watching them work on the computer and going, there's one thing I'm never going to do, that's use a computer to do my work. I originally went to be a building engineer, which I hated, and then I left and then went back to art college. And there were two courses in England that did computer graphics. One was at Middlesex and one was at Cornwall Polytechnic. And because I'd originally wanted to be an architect, I had this weird art science background, which just made computer graphics easy. It was a sandwich course, so you went into industry every year for 3 years, and then the fourth year you didn't. And all the people all the lecturers were saying, it's so difficult to get in television, there's 10,000 people for every job, and computer graphics, who knows how that's going to be. And I got a job with the Atomic Energy Authority, and I had oodles of cash to spend on basically propaganda, and we'd use all the top-end facilities. And whenever the facility found out I knew computer graphics, I was offered a job. So in every facility I worked in, they offered me a job, and I picked the one I wanted and never went back to college.
So I moved to London. It was the hive of the industry for film, television. Mooched around London for a while, and then I got a job in '83 at Russia's post-production as a runner, a film runner. So your job was to take the cans of film to the lab and bring them back, and making tea and coffee for the other workers in the building, for the editors and the film editors and the graphic people.
My first job was at a company called Electronic Arts, not the games company. The original Electronic Arts is an English animation and slide presentation company. This is before there was video. You could not output computer animation to video. We had to plot it to film, frame by frame. So my job starting was to look after the camera, loading it, making it work, taking the film off, sending it to the lab, bringing the film back from the lab for dailies for the animators.
The first company I worked at was called Cal Video, and we had a VAX 750, which had a whole megabyte of memory. It had a disk platter. There were 9 platters that held 256 megabytes. And you know, it was one of those where you put the cake dish over it and pick it up. And we had to back up onto tape, and each tape stored 256 megabytes of. It was so long ago. It was so long ago, and it was in a pressure-controlled room. And then the FGS came out. Cal had decided the FGS would be operated by 2D people, and 3D was getting too powerful. And Peter Stothard, who sold both machines, the machine to Cal and the machine to Russia's, knew I was pissed off. So he went to Godfrey Pye. Godfrey wouldn't buy the machine unless Peter could provide some way to work it. They poached me, so I went to Russia's, quadrupled my salary, moving from a small boutique to a place that actually did commercials, and I had my own FGS.
The FGS was a huge investment, and it was a huge gamble on Godfrey's part, but Godfrey, like Ian, was the kind of guy who could see the future coming. Back then, if you wanted to do CGI, you had to be a programmer. or you had to get a bunch of programmers to program things. And it was all this dark art of, people typing hundreds of lines of code to make an object appear on screen. Whereas the FGS, which was basically a souped up character generator, you could type in a line of text and it would appear on screen in 3 dimensions. You could turn a knob, it would move. You could set keyframes, move it back and forth across the screen. You could then take that text and press a button and extrude it to give it a 3rd dimension. So you could build 3D models super fast and move them real time. And back then that was like magic. That clients saw that and just went, oh my God, I have to think of something to do with this system. It was state of the art for all its crudity today. There were a lot of companies like Rush's that did the film editing, the video editing, stuff like that, the commercials industry. And they were all within this sort of square mile of Soho. It was very much a pub industry because we all had the same local pubs. We had a pub just around the corner from Rush's called the Crown and Two Chairmen, just along the street from the Dog and Duck, which is still a fantastic pub to this day. You all knew each other, everybody knew each other, all the film editors knew each other, all the video editors knew each other, and all, as it grew, as the industry grew, the CGI guys got to know each other as well. Back then I had my plan, and I had the degree that I'd just studied for, which was very much, some of it was relevant to the plan. Some of it was about use of film and film editing and things like this. Some of it wasn't, but I'd enjoyed doing it and I had an aptitude for it, the animation stuff. My plan changed when I met Ian. I didn't know it was changing when I met Ian. I think he did. The first time I met Ian was when I took him a cup of tea, first thing in the morning, and the receptionist actually said, be careful because he's been up all night and he's a bit tired and grumpy. I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, knock on the door, hello, Mr. Pearson, I brought you tea. And he's like, go in. And it's very dark. It's a graphics room, so it's very dark. There's a little lamp over here, and there's the light from the monitors. And there's this guy pressing keys and like, and, grunting. And I'm like, there's your tea. He's like, thanks.
If you're a good runner, you're a good anything. And if you're a bad runner, you should be sacked immediately. And Gavin was like the best runner ever. And he had graphics, and I saw it, and he showed me his reel, and his reel was really good. So he was never going to be a runner for long. You just knew he was a good guy. You could trust him.
Ian is a Geordie, which is the British equivalent of a Klingon. He's big and he's loud and noisy, and he drinks, and they have that's the reputation, the alleged reputation of Geordies. And so here's Ian, a Geordie, which is as north as you can go without being a Scotsman. And me, a Yorkshireman, also a northerner, although Ian calls me a southerner. And we were working at this company in Soho in London, and everybody was scared of him. All the other runners were terrified of Ian. So if ever the call came from reception going, could somebody take Ian a cup of tea? All the other runners were like, you do it, because you're a northerner and you get on with him, and you don't seem to be scared of him. So I used to take him his cup of tea and his bacon sandwich, because he'd been there all night. He was always there all night. We're sleeping on his couch and things like this, watching the machine render. And I'd sort of look at what he was working on and go, oh, that's interesting, because I was a graphic designer and an animator. So I was interested in this graphic design system that could do animation. So I was like, oh, yeah. And he'd be like, oh, yeah, you do it like this, and this is how you do it and stuff. And I'd talk to the other runners, and they'd be like, when I ask him to show me the machine, he tells me to F off. So all the time I was there working as a runner, and I was the only runner who could go into the FGS room unchallenged. And he'd show me what he was doing, and he'd be nice to me. And I'm like, the bastard was grooming me for a job.
Gavin didn't want to do CG computer graphics either, and he got hoodwinked into, like, first thing, come here, I'll do this, or I'll strangle you.
Because I'm there going, oh no, I'm going to be a film editor, and then I'm going to be a film director. And he's like, yeah, okay. And he let it go. And then what happened was in early '84, it would have been, I guess, they got the gig to do Dire Straits' Money for Nothing. Steve Barron, was a film and pop promo director, huge in the 80s. And he'd done Billie Jean, which was huge. And he worked out of his own company, which was a company called Limelight. So they were a production company that made movies, commercials, and pop promos. Ian knew Steve Barron because he'd worked with him on a movie called Electric Dreams. He'd actually done some very simple, back then, graphic sequences. He was always trying to push boundaries and do something different, and do something nobody had ever done. Because this was the birth of MTV and the rise of MTV, and he was definitely in there at the ground floor, going up like a rocket. And Ian said to him, you need to do a pop promo using CGI, because nobody's ever done it.
And I said, pop in, I've got a new machine, it's real time, come and have a look. 2 days later, he's in talking about it, and he says, when I get something, I'll bring it to you. And off he went, and then months later he comes back in and goes, I've got this thing, Dire Straits. Yeah. And he says, do you think you can do this? And I went, yes. Which was a lie.
Are you sure? Yes.
Absolutely.
Ian took this idea because he knew it would cost money and take time and chew up resources and probably go over budget. But it was gonna be a big thing. So Ian took it to Godfrey and said, I want to do this promo, and he pitched him on the idea. And Godfrey's like, oh, great, what do you need? And Ian said, I need an assistant. And Godfrey said, where the hell are we going to find one of those?
Meanwhile, Gavin was refusing all my offers of money, sex, drugs. He wouldn't come and work with me. And then I did my ultimatum. I'm not doing Dire Straits unless Gavin Blair joins me as my assistant.
And I'm like, but I want to be a film director. He's like, yeah. Do the gig with me, do this job with me. And after we've done the job, then you can decide what you want to do. And it was 3.5 weeks of hell.
This machine, it'd be working for 6 hours while you're working it, and you'd start it rendering and go to the pub, and it crashed 7 minutes after you left the building.
Because back then, kids, you had to render the frame in the machine, and then the machine would use a frame buffer to talk to a videotape machine, spin up the videotape machine, pre-roll the videotape machine, roll it forward, record the single frame, and then record the next frame, and then do the same thing over and over and over again. And if the tape machine threw ahead and chewed up the tape, you'd lost everything. And if the FGS machine, midway through render, went, you know what, I'm sick of this animation file, and trashed the file, you had to reanimate the scene again and do it all again.
And we got struck by lightning?
Oh yes, we got struck by lightning. It's like even God doesn't want us to finish this. It was just horrible. It was weird.
It's like the whole building
policeman
reset.
died that night making a phone call. If there's a lightning storm, never touch a phone apparently, a landline.
I thought Dire Straits looked amazing when it was finished. Everyone we showed it to was like, oh my God, that's amazing.
I thought it was an innovation, a really, really cool new way of showing a character or telling a story.
And I look at it and go, oh, I hate the way they slide along the floor and things like that. I nitpick it to pieces. But at the time, it was like, well, that was an achievement.
The winner is Dire Straits, Money for Nothing.
When it won Best Video, for us, it was the middle of the night sort of thing. So we only heard the next day when we came into work that it had won. And then, of course, you get the parade of clients coming in with storyboards going, showing you the storyboard, and you're like, that's Dire Straits. We were like, CG rock stars, and we were in magazines and things like this. It was like, oh my God, we're really pushing things. We were doing these big, important jobs for big, important clients, and we were, like with Dire Straits, pushing the boundaries. We were pushing a machine and ourselves to do something that nobody had ever seen before. We were in the Crown of Two Chairman after doing Dire Straits, so we hadn't slept much in days and days and days. So we were very tired and probably a bit smelly. And we were sitting in the pub, and we'd been in there for a couple of hours, so several pints had been consumed, possibly some Jack Daniels as well.
Numerous drinks.
All the drinks.
All the drinks.
And Ian said, we could do a show like this, an animated show. And I'm like, you're mad, man, because that was hell. We just went through hell.
Yeah.
And you said we should do a show, and I said you were crazy.
Yeah.
Because we were dead.
We didn't sit down day one and go, let's make a show called ReBoot. We sort of just started talking about the pros, the cons, how it would work. Is it possible? Are we crazy? Could you do it? Obviously, if we're doing it in the FGS, it's going to look like Dire Straits. And a very early question, whenever we talked about it, was how do we explain what it looks like?
For ReBoot, the original idea that people were talking about was using the guys out of Dire Straits to do a TV series, maybe 5-minute episodes and things.
Yep.
And ReBoot was set in a computer because at the time, it looked like a computer. You know, we couldn't do real life or even.
That was it. Everybody looked at the drawings and went, "Well, why does it look like that?" And you'd go, "Because it's inside a computer."
Because it's inside a computer.
And everybody went, "Oh yeah."
It just stripped down the arguments very quickly.
You could see people's eyes light up when we said it's set inside a computer, because computer animation and computers in general were very new and leading edge and all this kind of thing. And like, oh yeah, computers can do anything, you know. You know, you don't need joints. You can have objects just floating in the air inside a computer. You can do anything inside a computer. We were still doing our day jobs, obviously, doing commercials and things like this. And we were talking about doing this show in CG. And it was just like this thought exercise while we were working. And then we got to the point where Ian said, okay, we need outside help. We need to talk to somebody who's already done it, who's already made a kids show in England that went to broadcast. And that's when I said, well, my tutor at college, John Grace, did a stop frame animated show called Portland Bill. And he created it and he wrote it. And it got made and it went to air and we've all seen it on the telly. And Ian's like, we need to talk to John. And he was like the third member of the team because he'd been there, done that. So obviously he was a much older person than us. And he had like wife and kids in Leicester. So when the decision was made to fly across the Atlantic and make the show, he stayed behind. What was it called? The first version of ReBoot? I think was it called ReBoot? I know it was something like ReBoot Adventures Across the Mainframe or something like that. That was the early idea. At this point, it was still a very young show. The scenario, the world it would inhabit, the characters in that world. And the heroes were called Chip and Dee, not Bob and Dot. But the villains, right from the get-go, were Megabyte and Hexadecimal. This is back when it was Megabyte there. This is back when this was very much just after Dire Straits. This is very, 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 very early ReBoot when it was me, Ian, and John Grace. Ferret, or it might even be no. We initially thought of calling him Mac and he would be a Scotty dog, but then we're like, no, we'll get into trouble for that. So then he became Frisket. And we started doing some tests. Now, we had to be very careful. I mean, at the time, we were, because of things like Dire Straits, we were cock of the walk at Russia's, and we could get away with a lot. But Ian was like, yeah, but we can't push it too far. So we were just doing little tests for fun, really. For fun. Well, that's what we told people. So this is the data. This is building those models on the FGS. You had to use a very simple, primitive programming language to build any model that wasn't a digitizable, extrudable shape. You'd lay out your shape, and you'd have to define X, Y, Z coordinates for every point on the model, and then tell the computer how to join them together. So now this stuff here, that's Ian's drawings. I wonder who that's the prototype for. And there. Wow. I told you I had a picture that Ian drew that was a prototype. This is in the FGS room at Russia's. So this would have been, goodness me, mid-80s, 86, 87. This was very soon after the whole, because of look at the design of it. It's a bit curvy, but it's not quite the boxy FGS stuff, but it's not quite the Alias, and it's getting towards that. So I don't know, maybe 88, 89, something like that. Wow. Ian actually left Russia's and set up a new company called The Mill,
Mill was basically me and Chris Roth, not Chris Broth, which is so weird I can't tell you. We left Russia's and spent 2 years getting the money together to create the first all-digital facility.
Ian used to have a partner called Chris Roth, who they worked together at Pearson Roth Productions, I think they were for a while. They'd gone independent because they were planning on setting up the mill. I was working for a company called Quantel. They made the only digital post-production gear that was available at that time. They hired Pearson Roth to make a big show reel for them. I ended up working with them, or offering to work for them for free, because I wanted to learn. I was just a kid and I was sort of trying to figure out this industry that suddenly I was involved in. So we just started getting together and talking about this idea they had. It wasn't called the mill yet. That was, we're gonna do something, and we're raising money for it, and you should come. And I was like, okay.
It was that classic VHS Betamax thing of all the other facilities like, well, no, we're doing fine the way we are. Digital, I'm sure it'll all be digital one day, but maybe later. And Ian was like, no, we're going digital and we're doing it now.
We could sell digital editing at the same price as 1-inch editing, which would screw all our competitors up. They'd have to drop their price because we were digital and they weren't. The cost savings in digital in the machine room, everything's digital, so it's locked. You're not setting up bars and having generation losses. And the mill was a beautiful facility.
Because it was this huge building on Great Marlborough Street with this vast hangar of a client reception with spiral staircases and wrought iron and lots of wood. And it was like going into a posh hotel.
The whole facility was amazing because they had a switcher matrix. You could see what was going on in other rooms.
And we transitioned from the FGS to Alias. And ReBoot evolved with the systems. So now we had smooth, shiny objects, and our hero became Bob, not Chip.
The ReBoot adventures take place here in the mainframe. One of the best things about living inside a computer is you can surf the static on your hoverboard if you're good enough.
He poached me from Russia's, plus a bunch of other people. And that's also when we brought Phil Mitchell on board.
After having watched Money for Nothing and knowing Gavin and Ian from seeing what they were doing at the mill, I loved it. I absolutely fell in love with what they were doing. I saw the possibilities. I don't know if I really saw very clearly, but I saw that there were possibilities and that I wanted to be part of it.
He fit into the ReBoot team just so easily and became the fourth member. Ian, Phil, and I were known collectively as the Hub.
The Hub was called the Hub because it was the center of the wheel of the mill at the time.
To this day, they'll say, oh yeah, we used to have to run things by the Hub.
Individually, probably we're good at what we do, but we're not world shaking. However, you hook us to an identity like the Hub, whispered in hushed tones in bars across London or whatever, and it starts to pick up a momentum.
Now that the show was getting very real, Limelight had brought Chris Brough in to be our producer. He knew the business, he knew LA. As it would turn out, he also knew Vancouver.
I produced a number of shows, a few hits, one of which was a thing called The Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin, which was the first show that I convinced Jim Henson to distribute internationally that was not something he had created. So we created a bonding because that was a very successful show for everyone. They had a very talented guy called Steve Barron, who was a director that had done films like Coneheads, the first Ninja Turtles movie. He made a lot of hits. He was a clever guy. Steve was directing a series called Storyteller with John Hurt for NBC with Henson. At that time, because Limelight was probably the leading independent set of producers in London, Ian, Gav, and Phil kind of went in to pitch them this show called ReBoot, which he thought was interesting. It was kind of in a formative period, but they had some initial artwork, and they had some pretty good ideas. And Steve liked the idea, but he said to Jim, I don't know how to produce, kids programming. So Jim suggested that maybe we meet. So we hooked up, and they sort of told me about the show, and I thought, this is kind of interesting. I said, okay, well, we'll meet again, and I kind of left, and I met with Steve in the morning and said, look, I got to get along with these guys. I don't know what they think of me. If we get along, I'm in on it. But I think the show may need a little work, as it needs a couple of more characters, and this is just coming from my background doing it on Saturday morning.
Needed a lot of work.
Well, you know, and it's a brilliant idea. First of all, it's a show that is aimed for children, but you have no children in it, so you're going to need a kid.
We were adamant that we didn't want a kid in the show, because we used to sit around watching Saturday morning TV and go, these kids ruin shows. These stupid little kids running around. And Chris Broff, who knew the business, said, no, you got to have a kid in there, you got to have somebody in there for the kids watching the show to relate to. You got to have a little, and he literally said, you got to have a little kid, a little Enzo running around in there. He said those very words. And we were like, so sure enough, we create the character, we put the kid in the show, the little brother to start, and he was right, because I love Enzo. Enzo's great.
And I said, look, we've got to come up with a through line for this show. So my suggestion to you is, let's sell it as we want to provide mythology into technology for children. So for kids to really comprehend what we all recognized as a technological revolution that was happening before our very eyes, to imbue that technology with characters, with mythology, with storytelling, would be something we thought the kids would really latch onto. Everybody would latch onto it. I talked about being a kid on a farm in which we had an old-fashioned washing machine, and I was looking at the pulleys and how the whole thing worked, and I was fascinated by it, because in those days, you didn't have just a piece of aluminum with a bunch of lights and a push button. You saw a cause and effect, and you learned from that. And I said, kids are getting denied those experiences today. So now you look at a computer, they don't have a clue what's going on inside, so let's give them an idea.
We had to be very careful what we did on the machines, because the machines belonged to the mill. They did not belong to us. And we did not have carte blanche to just use them, because machine time is very expensive. Limelight actually paid for some animation tests, which Ian and I did, which show the stages of development from the Dire Straits blocky stuff. And then there's a sort of halfway house between where we ended up and where we started, which is the guy on the hoverboard over the city, with the voice very much like Michael Keaton's Batman.
My quasi-logical friends love to drive the logicals nuts. Once we lined up all the random bites into the shape of Madonna's butt, it was excellent.
We did the tests and we sent whatever footage we got finished to Chris in LA to edit and put sound effects and dialogue onto. And we had a suggestion of the dialogue, but we left it up to him to deal with putting the tapes together. So we sent these tapes across, and then like 2 weeks later, the tape comes back from LA, Limelight label on it, and Ian and I watch it, and he's put this voice to Megabyte, which was basically Joe Pesci.
Bad data and the forces of chaos. That's me, Megabyte. I love to rumble and I hate to fumble.
And I think maybe it was our fault a little bit, because we did it almost as a joke, because we were big into the Blues Brothers at the time. We did a sequence where both Hacker, who was this sort of Frankenstein monster who would evolve later into Hack and Slash, but Hacker and Megabyte both had Ray-Bans on. And there's a shot where Megabyte folds his arms, he's got Ray-Bans on. We had no audio, it was just an animation test. So I guess Chris took one look at that and went, okay, I've got an idea for this. And he got this guy new to put this Joe Pesci voice on. And we get this tape and we watch it. We're like, oh my God, what the hell is this?
Our plan is to steal a whole bunch of data, get super intelligent, and take over the mainframe.
We were like, Ian was on the phone. What have you done?
That was Steve Barron's idea, using the Joe Pesci voice.
All right.
I did not like the voice, just for the record, okay?
In all our publicity stuff that we'd written for the show, that Megabyte was suave and British and very much George Sanders Shere Khan. But to be fair, Chris redeemed himself on that one, because he was the one who put us in touch with Tony J.
They will never know what hit them.
Got some Ian Gibson stuff, yeah. So Ian Gibson was a comic book artist that Ian and I were big fans of. After the show drifted from the FGS onto slightly more capable and complex systems, down to the Alias. And we knew it could do bendy things and curvy things better. Ian's style very much matched what we thought the systems were capable of. They're more organic, they're more curvy, but they still have joints. They still have ball joints and socket joints and things like this. So, and there's some concepts in here that, you know, made it all the way through to the finished show, because there's Bob's apartment. You've still got that spiral of stairs. Hack and slash, back when they had legs, because it's like we were looking for any chance we could to help the animation. If it can hover, let it hover. If it can roll around on a ball, let it roll around on a ball. The stuff we did at the mill, that was for real. That had a budget, it had storyboards, it had a script. We bit off way more than we could chew. We'd booked a week of time and to do like a 5-minute promo. Oh, what were we thinking? A 5-minute promo. I think we barely did 45 seconds.
Hey, Mike in the morning coming at you. Today's headlines.
You know, Mike in the morning can become a real pain in the morning.
Megabyte was supposed to turn up at the end and be animated, and all there is a turnaround of the model with Tony J's voice.
Wally doesn't live here anymore.
They were very seat of your pants. Get as much done as you possibly can and let Chris cut it together to the best of his ability. The soft image test, we didn't do that one. We had Ian Gibson's design for Bob. We gave it to a guy at Soft Image who was their demo guy. He would take the Soft Image system to trade shows and demo it. So he was their best guy. And that was a test of like the way you could deform things, which is why we have Bob getting squished into a tube and going round in a spiral, because they were demoing what the model would look like, what Bob could look like, and how easy he was to animate, and how they could do the deformation stuff.
There was some very strange ideas. I mean, our original idea was that Megabyte was a virus who'd basically taken over mainframe and was akin to a mare, like a corrupt mare. But people didn't know he was a virus. And then
Bob was his doorman.
And Bob was his doorman. And there was a crack in the CPU, and he used to have to sneak down and basically shoot up with this energy leaking out of the CPU.
Now, we didn't come up with that.
No, I stopped it immediately.
The pixel shock.
Oh, that's right.
And to be a gamer, he has to charge up, and he has to sneak into Megabyte's lair and charge up so he can play games because he wants to be a game hero. And you're like, okay, so he's like a drug addict?
Yeah. And then we went to a TV station, and they said, so he's a drug addict.
Right.
And that was it. Dead.
That idea is gone.
Yeah.
This is for the test that Ian and I did at the mill. Mike in the morning coming at you. Bob waking up. Trying to get some food. Trying to pull the plug on Mike. Looking for food. Oh, that's Brendan. Yeah, that's a Brendan storyboard. We were working with comic book artists. We worked with Ian Gibson. Ian and I were both huge fans of, and it was an honour to work with him, and he helped us push the show forward. And then later we worked with Brendan McCarthy, the crazy genius.
Brendan McCarthy was brilliant as a designer. I mean, some of the people these guys attracted were stunningly talented.
I was part of what was called the British invasion, the 1980s revamp of the comic book industry, you know, the big names being Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, people like that. And I was part of that, and, made a name for myself, started drawing Judge Dredd, doing covers for Vertigo Comics, who were DC Comics subsidiary. Gavin, Ian, and Phil Mitchell were all avid readers of, as was everybody in the UK probably at that time, of a certain age. But by the early 90s, I'd done a decade of that, and I felt I was kind of getting a bit bored with comics. Felt I'd said what I had to say. The comics then led to me being contacted by a film director called Steve Barron, he was the leading pop video director of the era. He had got the hub, Ian, Gavin, and Phil. They wanted to do an animated TV series in CGI. So they originally had approached Ian Gibson to do some stuff. Ian Gibson was another comic book artist on 2000 AD, the comic that Gavin, Ian and Phil all read, and I read too and ended up drawing for. Ian had quite a cartoony style, and he did a lot of robots in a particular strip he did called Robo Hunter, which everybody loved. So I could see them going to Ian first. Ian did some nice designs, but Steve Barron wasn't happy with what the guys had done, that it wasn't there yet for him. So he brought me in because I was working with him, and I looked at Ian's designs, lost some of them, and kept, for example, the basis of Megabyte and the dog Frisket. Oh yeah, Hack and Slash. So those three characters, the basis of them were by Ian Gibson, but I took them and modified them so they would fit into the wider design I was doing.
I remember one of the guys from the mill, who was a lawyer, saying, "Is ReBoot going to ever happen?" And I said, "It's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen." I'm convinced of that now.
Ian has this vision of this is where we're going, and then at a certain point, and it happened at Rush's and it happened at the mill too, the management start going, "We're not sure about this, we're quite happy doing what we're doing, and your brave new vision is going a bit too far for us."
To him, it became, that's why we did the mill, because I want to do ReBoot. The mill people were like, "No, that doesn't make any sense. CG animated shows don't exist, and advertising pays a lot."
And I was very happy to leave the mill, even though I had created the monster. I can't tell you what happened fully.
It might have involved him getting fired for throwing an ashtray at someone.
But I left the mill and ended up in High Court. It's weird because the money I got from the mill allowed me to survive to get ReBoot going.
Yeah.
He left the mill and packed his case and went to LA and lived on Chris Bruff's couch.
He had his own bedroom and bath, okay? I don't know where the couch BS came from, okay? He was well taken care of.
And he only used to turn over and wake me up once or twice a night.
Phil and I were still at the mill, and Ian was in LA working with Chris, working with Brendan on getting the pitch ready, and working with Kelly Daniels, who had now left Bosch and was now in LA working with Ian. He was our systems engineer. And they worked together on a promo for Def Leppard called Let's Get Rocked. Steve, Limelight, Ian, and Brendan basically used that as an exercise, a training exercise, getting ready for ReBoot, because not only was it the jump to soft image, but the models and the way they worked and the inverse kinematics. It was basically a test of all that. And the character in that promo is kind of like Enzo version 1, designed by Brendan, built and animated by Ian.
That Def Leppard video was also crucial to selling the TV series because we shifted the design in the Def Leppard video to something that would look more like ReBoot. Steve put all the money, the budget, to get the really good central character, the kid walking around looking cool and everything, but all CGI. He used up so much of the money, he had to use wireframe elements as a feature of the video. That's the only reason they're in there. They just didn't have the money to animate them. Back then, even wireframe was new to look at. People hadn't even seen that.
Like, everything happened at the right time for ReBoot. I used to do tests. I had a sort of example frame. This frame takes how long to do? And I'd try it out on different machines. The computers came from SGI, and the software came from Softimage. It was fantastic because I could actually really test this. If we can get frames out in 15 minutes or less, the numbers all work. And for the first time ever, it was possible to do an animated show.
I guess Ian and Chris decided we finally had a pitch worth pitching. And they started pounding the pavement, going to the various networks.
Basically, I was there for nearly 2 years trying to sell the show.
Yeah.
I know that I first went to Fox, and the president of Fox I worked for at Hanna-Barbera for 5 years. So, you know, they initially were really interested to buy it, but then I think they did a little homework, and they went, computer animation, it's never going to happen. And that was, you got to understand something, a lot of people went, this will never happen.
All of the experts were telling us, no, you can't do that. How? Nobody's ever done it before. It's impossible. How do you do that? And we're just like, we're going to do it.
And eventually they took it to ABC, where Jenny Trias said yes.
She was my boss at ABC, one that hired me, and brought me in.
Jenny Trias became a great fan. We had a lot of success with the Teddy Ruxpin movie, and they were really thrilled with that. I'd done some work with them over the years, so we had a pretty good relationship.
So what happened was I started at ABC. So I just started at ABC, brand new in there, and like I said, they gave me a number of shows. I had Tales from the Crypt Keeper, animated version of Free Willy, which was always interesting, because the whale talks, and then they gave me ReBoot also, and ReBoot was first CG show. I didn't know anything about cell animation anyway, so I didn't know what the difference was.
When I went into ABC to sell this thing, I was aware that the longest piece of computer animation was about 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And I thought that delivering 24 minutes a week could be a bit of a challenge. And so did they.
I think there might have been doubters, obviously, because it's that classic thing of, oh, this is a great idea, can you do it? I think we can do it. No. Can you do it?
We didn't know how it was done, so we didn't know if we were doing it right or wrong.
Can you tell us definitely? No, we can't tell you definitely that we can do it. That might have been why it took a while for somebody to have the vision. And Jenny, I think, was, I've heard her described as a person who had vision. Would look at it and go, no, this could work, this could be good, this could be big, let's do it.
ABC had dropped to #2 behind Fox, which was kind of the ratings killer for kids at the time.
We're getting our clock cleaned by Fox because they had everything from Power Rangers to X-Men, Batman in the middle, and all this other stuff, and it was just a disaster. And we had this soft lineup, and the only thing that could be interesting was ReBoot.
Jenny had wanted to throw some writers on us that were kind of star writers from the day.
So by the time ReBoot came along, I had been in TV, making TV shows for about 12, 13 years. And I had a really good relationship with Jenny Trias at ABC and her team. We had done a few shows together. And Jenny kept saying, hey, there's this show I'm working on, this historic show. It's really cool. And even though I was known in my career for doing comedy stuff and gags, visual gags, she knew that my proclivity or my gravity, I really like science fiction. I was really into all that. And she was like, well, I think you'd really like this project. And they reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in looking what we've got? And I'm like, yeah, I was pretty excited by it. It was just something I felt like I really could sink my teeth in.
I do remember us saying, you know, it's going to cost a lot to make this show. And we're going to need a lot of animators to make this show. And it dawned on us, dawned on me, at a certain point that there probably aren't enough animators in London to make this. We need to cast the net further afield. We know we need to go to a place where they have more animators and bigger studios, and where it would be cheaper to produce.
What bothered me was how much this thing was going to cost. I mean, I would get top dollar from ABC, which is only about $350,000 a half hour, which for standard animation you can actually make a profit on. I had serious doubts there was going to be any profitability attached to the show at $350,000. I would say, in hindsight, that show probably cost more, like over $1 million an episode.
I did the budget for ReBoot doing it in London, and the computers are so expensive there, and the stuff. And then I did a budget for doing it outside of London, in some Birmingham or somewhere cheaper. And I think I saved £500,000 just by moving it. And then they shipped me to LA, and I got all the guys, the suppliers in, and got the quotes from them. It was another $1 million cheaper. Nice. Yeah. And then we moved it to Vancouver, and I did it again, and it was another $1 million cheaper.
There's no way we could do the thing in LA. We just didn't have the money. I basically said, if you want to make the show, we got to do it. We got to shoot it in Vancouver, because I had studios here. I created a company called BLT here in Vancouver to basically cast and record, a lot of animation. I was an executive producer at Deke Studios, where we had about 11 shows in production. SAG was killing us on the residuals for the voiceovers. So we created BLT, and we kind of helped form BC Performers Union, because I needed a breakaway union to really offset what were crazy residual costs.
Chris Brough had a company up here, and he shipped me and Kelly up. And I was wearing shorts, and it was not short weather. And the airport was so small, you got off the plane on the steps and walked across walked in. And they seduced me. They took me to Il Giardino's and strip clubs and on a boat up the coast. And it was like, I'm from Sunderland and we live in London where we look at brick walls. And me and Kelly went out, met, what's his name, captain of the Rangers?
What, Mark Messier?
Mark Messier was in a bar. Was the biggest, ugliest man I'd ever seen in my life. And for the guy from Vancouver went, he's the captain of the Rangers. I went, hello, and he was really nice. We had a great time. And me and Kelly got so drunk and went back to the hotel and phoned him.
We get into work one morning, so like 8, 9 a.m. England time, which is like 1, 2 in the morning Vancouver time. Get a call from the switchboard. Gavin, I think it's Ian for you. I think he's drunk. Me and Phil are like, we shut the door, lock the door, because this is like reboot business. Lock the door, put the phone on speaker, and it's Ian going, guys, we're doing it in Vancouver.
God's country. This is wonderful. We're going to be here.
There's gorgeous mountains, sea. Oh, it's amazing. Kelly, tell him how amazing it is. And we hear like, it's amazing. Because Kelly's like spark out on the bed in the Gravel Island Hotel, I think. And he's like, yeah, we're going to do it in Vancouver, guys. It's going to be fantastic. Click. And me and Phil are like, looking at each other like, what? What just happened?
I fell in love with Vancouver in the first 15 minutes. I don't think we would have had a chance in LA. I don't think Reboot was possible anywhere but here.
The show would not have happened without Steve and Limelight. It also would not have happened without Chris Bruff, because he took the impossible task of selling something that nobody knew what it was, nobody knew if it could be done, and selling it. And then on the technical side of things, Kelly, I don't think, Kelly was just our Viking warrior in the engineering department.
And Kelly just became like a fast, firm friend. He went through hell with us.
He did.
Kelly Daniels, who I think is one of the unsung heroes of the show. I mean, a genius in networking and all sorts of stuff. I mean, super guy.
Did you get it back? Oh, great work. No problem. Business as usual.
Kelly Daniels, he was the one that, kept all our machines and our network running.
Because he was a really brilliantly technically minded guy. Things were a lot harder to put together. Things were a lot less uniform back then in terms of getting these machines to talk to those machines and getting stuff into editorial and kind of understanding the entire post-production pipeline. He was really great for that. And I was sad to hear that he passed away. But he was a rad dude. I loved him. He was a good guy.
If nobody's told you this already, there's no history of Reboot that's complete without a tip of the hat to Kelly. Kelly passed away a while ago, but it was Kelly who was the partner for Ian and Phil and Gavin, the hub. Kelly was the guy who built the studio from the ground up, basically.
Dependable, reliable, good sense of humor, nice and quiet, but fun to be around. That's my recollection of Kelly.
So the problem with ABC was they wanted it like yesterday. And we were so ill-prepared to, creatively the guys were rocking along. We've got some great writers, and that was really gelling well. The technical side was they gave us 9 months, and we pulled it off.